This is was in the Episcopal homily service, and I thought it was very pertinent, and well, you can draw your own conclusions. Andrew Greeley, in his homilies, published in 2012, once retold the parable of the Good Samaritan in Chicago terms. And he specified that it's legitimate in telling the story to reverse the team affiliation of the combatants. So here goes. Once upon a time, a Cubs fan and a Sox fan got into an argument during a game at the Cell, or whatever we're calling it now, Progressive Rate Field. The argument was, of course, the fault of the Sox fan. He shouted the first epithet. He knocked the Cubs cap from the other man's head. He threw a beer can at the Cubs fan and his wife by mistake. What was the poor Cubs fan to do but push the Sox fan, who obviously had too much of the drink? One thing led to another. The ushers and the cops had to separate the two men, and since cops and the Cell tend to be Sox fans, they ejected the Cubs fan to the taunts of yuppie scum, go home. On the following day, as the Cubs fan drove out of the parking lot, flush with a series victory, he saw his adversary at a corner on State Street with a flat tire and the hood up on the car. He pulled over and, despite his wife's protests, helped change the tire and provide a battery charge. The two men shook hands and promised to meet again when the Red Line World Series came around. I thought I'd get at least a chuckle out of that. It might work. I laughed when I read it the first time. Anyway, so the Good Samaritan, just again for a little background, Samaritans and Jews had hated each other for probably 8 centuries by the time our Lord is on the scene. And it had to do with what the first reading is talking about today. In that first lesson today, we have Amos, who is from the southern kingdom of Judah, whom God calls and tells to go up to Israel and prophesy, because the prophets up there were just saying what the king wanted to hear. And God wanted to get through their stubbornness to hear the truth before it was too late. But we see that Amos goes up and he's challenged about his message. And he delivers the message in spite of the fact that they don't want to listen to what he has to say, telling him basically, go back where you came from. Earn your bread there by prophesying. Don't waste our time up here, because this is a holy place. You can go back down there. And, he defends himself, but the message stands. And not too long after this, the Assyrians overrun the northern kingdom. They take some people into exile, and they occupy Israel for the next couple hundred years. And so life became exactly what Amos and some of the other prophets who were his contemporaries had delivered to them. Well, after that period, those who were living up in the northern kingdom, particularly those who lived in the region called Samaria, objected to the idea that now they would have to go down to Jerusalem to the temple to worship. They said, well, we have a mountain here, and God used to let us worship here, so why do we need to go down there? And then because they had been very heavily influenced in that whole northern area by the occupation of the Assyrians, some of them began to kind of mix Assyrian religion with their own, and so the Jews from Judea regarded them as heretics. And so from that time onward, Jews and Samaritans did not get along with each other, rather despised each other. So here's Jesus, telling this parable, and the people are listening, and of course they expect that, okay, the two people connected with the temple are more worried about the ritual and being clean so that they can offer the prayers and the sacrifices. So that's why the priest and the Levite passed that man by, because it might have been a dead body, or he might have been so bloodied that if they even touched the blood, they would have been impure, and then they couldn't have done their job when they got down to Jerusalem to the temple. And so the people were expecting Jesus to say, and then a regular Jewish layperson comes by, and he's the one that does this good deed. But instead, Jesus says that this man comes and sees him and takes compassion on him, and that man was a Samaritan. And immediately, it changes the whole thing. Jesus has now turned their expectations totally upside down, and he said that the enemy, this rotten person, is the one who is moved with pity. And the word in Greek actually means he was wrenched in his guts. He felt it so strongly in his insides that he needed to do something, that he didn't think about whether this was a Samaritan or a Jew or whomever. He just went and did it. And he went above and beyond, because not only did he go over to the man, but then he performs first aid, pouring the oil on to clean around the wound, and then to pour it on the wine as an antiseptic. And then he takes him to an inn, and because he had to go on his way, he leaves money, quite a bit of money actually, several weeks' worth of wages, for him to be taken care of. And then he goes on his way and says, if you spend any more, I'll make it good on my way back. And so Jesus asks them, the lawyer that asks him the question, well, who was the neighbor? He said, you asked the question, and who is my neighbor? Who's the neighbor to the guy? And he said, well, I suppose it's the Samaritan, even though he didn't want to say that. And then Jesus says, go and do the same. Who is the enemy? Who is the one that you shouldn't have contact with? Who's the one that you should make sure stays away, is kept unwelcome? That's the question. Jesus came to reconcile God and humankind through the blood of his cross and through his resurrection. He came to be the one to bring us together. He came really as the Good Samaritan, who goes to those who are beaten and bloodied by life, to raise them up, to heal their wounds, to bring them into care, and through his compassion. But a lot of times, the only way God can do that is through you and me. And we can find all kinds of reasons why. Yeah, Lord, ask somebody else. I don't want to deal with those people. I don't want to deal with the homeless or the hungry. I don't want to deal with people who are different color from me. I don't want to deal with people who are different politics than I have. I don't want to even talk to them. And the Lord isn't buying it. He sent Amos in the first reading today to remind the people in the northern kingdom of the importance, first of all, of listening to his call and being obedient to God's will, so that they would not be overrun by their enemies. They would not be taken off into exile or basically imprisoned in their own country. But they let the animosity from all of that color their feelings over the centuries then towards each other. Paul, in the second lesson today from Colossians, is saying that for all who have come into Christ, that we are a new creation, and that we have this gift that's been given to us that encourages us to love, that we have been given hope, and we have been given faith, and we have been given love, and that those gifts that we've been given are meant to bear fruit in our lives, and that fruit is going to be seen in how we deal with other people within our four walls of our home, or within our parish community, or in the neighborhood at large, or in the world at large. Because we are the ones who extend the ministry of the Good Samaritan. We're the ones who extend the ministry of the Lord, who is the Good Samaritan, who comes to those who are in need and brings them to healing, and brings them to community, and brings them to a new welcome to life than they had before. We're the ones who are charged with carrying out that task. We're the ones that are supposed to be aware of who is it that needs to be brought into contact with Christ. Who is it that needs to be healed because of whatever's happened in their life, because of addiction of some kind, or because of a broken marriage, or because of loss of job, or some other situation that comes up, and they are feeling beaten down by circumstances and are lying there waiting for something to come to enliven them, to pick them up, to bring them back to life again. And when we know people like that, and we're afraid of going to them because what's somebody else going to think, or what are they going to think, or how are they going to react, or whatever it might be, then we are acting more like the Levite or the priest, who had perfectly just reasons not to get near that bloodied, beaten body that was dead for all they knew. But then the enemy comes, the Samaritan, and he jumps right in. We're called to welcome people into the community of faith. And sometimes the people that we welcome in might not always be the most agreeable to our particular sensibilities, but yet we are called to welcome them, because this welcome, this embrace, this place may really be for them an encounter with the Good Samaritan as much as with the Good Shepherd, because they will be able to come to some kind of healing. And whether they stay in this parish or not, whether they stay in this community or not, they will have been touched by the grace of God. They will have been touched by the healing hand of Jesus, by the love of this community of faith. or by, at least in a more general sense, at least by the love of Christians extended to them, whoever they are, so that they can know that God not only is an idea, but God is real. God is a person. And He's, as a person, deals with people. And as dealing with people, He deals through those who are the living members of His body to carry out this mission and will of the Lord for the healing and the salvation of all. In this Eucharist, we are invited as we are, with our burdens and our joys, our failures and our successes, to come to the Lord's table, however we feel, to receive what He wants to give us, so that we can be strengthened and encouraged to live the life of one who imitates Christ, the one who puts into practice what Jesus is saying about the Good Samaritan today, and what Jesus always says. So I leave that to you today, and hope and pray that all of us will take some time to go through the parable on our own, prayerfully, and ask the Lord to help us see more clearly when there are needs around us, what we can do for them, and how then we can help them perhaps come to this community of faith, or at least to reach out to the Christian community in general, to come to know and believe in God's love and to experience a healing and a peace beyond any human understanding.